Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Deja vu.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of TV shows that were later rebooted. This is season 1, which we're calling In the Zone, discussing the Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about season 1, episode 15, titled I Shot an Arrow into the Air. And I Shot an Arrow into the Air came out on January 15th, 1960. It was directed by Stuart Rosenberg, written by Rod Serling, based, another one, Mark, on a story by Madeline Champion, and starring Dewey Martin, Edward Binns, and Ted Otis.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance of things and
Suddenly up ahead,
just cross over. You're moving into what is another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Okay, so here is Rod Serling's opening voiceover for I Shot an Arrow into the Air. Her name is the Arrow One. She represents 4.5 years of planning, preparation, and training, and 1,000 years of science and mathematics and the projected dreams and hopes of not only a nation, but a world. She is the first manned aircraft into space, and this is the countdown, the last 5 seconds before man shot an arrow into the air.
And IMDb's description has order breaks down between 3 surviving crewmen whose rocket ship crashes on an unknown world with limited water and supplies. The world, not the rocket ship, had limited water and supplies. I suppose the rocket ship also
Probably
had
the
limited
rocket ship, too.
And supplies as well. That's true. So yeah, Mark, let's jump right into talking about this one. What do we think about Shot an Arrow into the Air?
Well, I had to actually relook through my notes on this one because this is just one that did not make much of an impression. I don't necessarily mean that negatively. There's been some that made a really bad impression. This one I just sort of watched. I'm like, okay, and then promptly forgot about. So I had to look back and see what I said about it.
Because as you know, we watched all of these episodes 14 years ago, and actually we watched them when they originally ran 61 years ago.
I look pretty good for whatever old that would make us.
Old.
Yeah. Actually, I like the opening voiceover about the culmination of 1,000 years of science and the whole world's hopes. It's this very sort of broad inspirational thing. I was a little surprised in the opening that... So it starts with some bad B-roll stock footage of a rocket in the command center, and then we go into the set, which is this giant 50s style control room with giant computers and flashing lights, and it kind of reminded me of Star Wars, in the sense of it had apparently advanced technology, but it's super
gritty,
manual, analog,
yeah.
Yeah, there's all this stuff, and we can launch a rocket ship. Yet there's still the big glass board where they're trying to track its trajectory with a pen.
Right.
Anyhow, so then it sort of disappears. They lose it, and I was just kind of surprised that there wasn't more VO at that point. This seemed like one. Serling's had a couple of these where there's some VO, a little bit of a scene, and then continues on. I thought there was going to be more setup there, but there wasn't. We just kind of land with the spacemen, the astronauts on this unknown world, and that's really where the rest of the episode goes. So I will say it kind of surprised me taking that turn. I thought it was going to be about the people in the control room trying to track them or figure out what happened or something, or maybe intercutting the two, and it's basically we're never all the people from the opening scene and all what happened with the rocket, how things went wrong, we never hear from again. The rest of it is just how these characters on the... All right, we're going to stop saying unknown world. On Earth, which is what it turns out to be, there's the big reveal, how they interact.
Specifically Reno, Nevada, or outside of Reno, Nevada.
Outside Reno, Nevada.
Mark, people are going to think they were even planning these things because you segue me so well for some of my opening comments, but we do not talk about these before we're on air. So 2 things.
We don't even listen to what each other say while we're on air.
I don't even watch these episodes. I'm just riffing off of what you're saying and just making assumptions. Yeah. So about that opening narration, I really appreciated when you pointed this out for I think, and When the Sky Was Opened, the opening narration, and also Judgment Night, both of those opening narrations were not about not about a character at all. And this was, I think, the third one probably that we've seen where the opening narration was about this ship instead of the people, which was kind of interesting because those, actually, I guess all three of those episodes have been three very character-driven episodes. And so we didn't get an introduction to these three. And there's three main characters, Corey, Colonel Bob Dunlin, and Pearson. And I also thought it was interesting that the Colonel was the only one that got, I assume, a first name or a last name. Either Corey and Pearson are last names or first names. But Colonel Bob Dunlin got his full name. So I thought that was also interesting, too, and kind of telling for this.
That is kind of interesting just that you mentioned that it's the ones, because a lot of these Twilight Zones are very plot driven or idea driven, and these character centered ones, you're right, it is interesting that all the ones where instead of talking about a character, they talk about the vehicle or object, have been ones that turn out to be character driven, not really about that. I mean, the Arrow 4 or whatever it is essentially like crashed and blown up like 2 minutes into the episode and never heard from again.
And I have a note on that specifically too. I felt like that since this was so character driven, one of our kind of recurring complaints, if there is one about the Twilight Zone, is that they don't have a ton of time to get into a lot of this stuff. Mm-hmm. I did not feel like we needed any of that sort of NASA-y setup, that we could have just seen three astronauts or space pilots or whatever crashed on what we find out is Earth. And the whole thing could have played out exactly the same without wasting, I think it was 3.5 minutes into the episode before we even saw the main characters.
That's a really good point. It doesn't add anything other than a little bit of misdirection, but it's not productive misdirection.
Right.
It's just like seeing people and man, they used the title twice in those first 3 minutes. So it's in the opening voiceover, and then one of the old guys is like looking out the window. He's like, I shot an arrow into the air. It fell to earth. I know not where. Like, yeah, we get it. It's the title of the episode, and the rocket is called Arrow, for Pete's sake.
So I do,
but
really,
we didn't need any of that.
No,
You're right.
And I really like two things about that. I really like the name of this episode. I thought that was kind of neat. That sort of nursery rhymey shot an arrow into the air. I don't even remember what you guessed from last week, and those two characters at the beginning, I'm just going to call them NASA for lack of basically mission control or whatever, were named characters in the IMDb description. And I was like, who the fuck are these two guys? And it was the guy that says that line and the guy he talks to about the fact that they're lost. I thought it was totally unnecessary. And I specifically made a note of when the time was. It was almost 3.5 minutes into the episode before we actually saw the three main characters of this episode.
And I'm gonna go a level further. I agree with you that it was not necessary. I'll go a level further and say I think the episode, even aside from the time wasted, would have been better without it, because that's the thing where they set up that they had like literally just launched from Earth. Like, we would have just like come in with these astronauts, like we just crash landed, and they could have said something about their, oh, we weren't on the ship that long, blah, blah, and left it a little vaguer. Like, this way it's very clear that they hadn't gotten far. So from the get-go, as soon as they land, like some of my first, and we see them staying there, I'm like, well, this looks like too giant to be an asteroid, because it's bigger than the moon, just looking at like where the horizon is. And they're only sailing for like a minute. They're clearly still on Earth.
Yeah. And
if they would have taken out that first scene, I think it could have been left a lot vaguer, like how long they had been out and were they on their trip home or not. And I think it would have like made the surprise a little more surprising.
I agree with you. And I think I have a note here that I feel like this reminded me a little bit of Third from the Sun, where early in the episode, they give us all the clues I guess it wasn't as early in Third from the Sun. Here it was almost right off the bat. Well, right off the bat when the characters are introduced. They basically give us all the clues we need to figure out the kind of Twilight Zone-y twist that this is Earth. Mm-hmm. When they're talking, they make some comments about the sun being in basically the same place in the sky, so we must be in the same orbit basically as Earth. And it was like, it was breathable air. It was a tolerable temperature, although it was hot. I did like Corey, who's kind of the bad guy of the crew. Right. It did have kind of a neat line, though, where he's like, he's like, oh God, he's like, he and Pearson go out on search, like different directions or start off together and then go off in different directions. And to see if there's anything around for them, because it really just looks like this rock. They picked a good shooting location because it looks like this rock, just rocks. It's just rocks and sand around them. And he says, when they come back, he's like, oh God, he's like, Colonel, he's like, it's so hot out there. He's like, you've never felt anything as hot as this. And I was like, that's kind of neat. That's kind of a neat line considering there actually are on Earth, and certainly, you know, you have felt something as hot as this.
Corey's actually like from Alaska and has never gone south of there.
Yes. Before we get too far into this, Mark, I just wanted to point out a couple kind of like statistics things. So
okay.
The writer...
Do these have to do with the vastness of space? Because I know that's a favorite topic of yours.
The running time was 22 minutes. No. Madeline Champion, Madeline, Madeline Champion, I assume that's a woman. This is her only IMDb credit. She wrote the radio play, or story, I guess. She wrote the story that this was based on. And I saw this on IMDb. She apparently met Serling at a dinner party, and she kind of pitched this idea to him. He liked it so much, he bought it from her. He literally paid her at the party and then gave her a screen credit for the idea. And it's her only IMDb screen credit. I thought that was kind of a neat story.
I need to go to more parties with, well, not Rod Serling anymore, but with like people like that where I can like pitch an idea and they're like, yeah, that sounds great. Here's $10,000. We'll buy you a story.
I think you just need to go to more parties, Mark. And then another thing,
because that's how I think people talk.
Yeah. Colonel Bob Dunlin, who was played by Edward Binns, was juror number 6 in the Henry Fonda version of 12 Angry Men. I thought that.
Wait, we saw somebody else who was in that as well,
yes.
Right?
He had sex with the sex robot, right? Wasn't that episode?
Yes, The Lonely.
The Lonely. Sorry that's
Which,
the
to
only
be
way
clear,
I
it
can
never showed him having sex or established it was a sex robot, though it clearly was.
I mean, let's be honest. We can read between the lines. Although Twilight Zone, this is one of the episodes where Twilight Zone did not give us enough credit for being able to read between the lines, because I feel like there was an over-explained, I'm sure we'll get to this, there was sort of an over-explained ending, I thought, to this one as well. And like we already talked about, the kind of NASA setup to it. The characters could have explained that they went off course and crashed on Earth, essentially, without us needing to see NASA trying to figure out that they lost contact. Who cares? They could have said from their end that they lost contact and did all this stuff. I just thought that was a weird choice at the beginning.
Yeah, well, in fact, I was looking at my notes, and after the first commercial break, so we had that opening sequence in NASA, then we have the first time we see the characters, and at that point I was still wondering if maybe it was going to kind of cut back and forth between them and NASA. And after the first commercial, I'm like, well, I guess it looks like we're just going to stay with the crew. I'm not sure why we saw NASA. And then I'll give credit to myself here after bashing myself for my guess last week was entirely wrong about what this was going to be. But at this point, after the first commercial, I'm like, well, my guess is it's going to be internal dissension and struggle to maintain their sanity and order, like Lord of the Flies-ish. Also, we already know they're on Earth.
Right. So speaking of connections, of that 12 Angry Men connection you mentioned, I looked up the main actors too. So Edward Binns, who played the Colonel, and Dewey Martin, who played Corey, were both kind of typecast as like cops, military men, but they were both on Police Squad in the whatever 70s or so.
Is Police Squad the
Naked Gun? I think that's from the file. I had to look it up. I think that's from the files of Police Squad, or Police Squad with an exclamation point.
It is Police Squad with an exclamation point. I think you're right.
Police Squad is the serious one. At least it looked like it for me. I didn't see Leslie Nielsen's name pop up.
So I'll be honest, I didn't know that there was an original like serious Police Squad that Naked Gun was parodying.
Well, now that you're saying that,
I mean, I knew it was sort of parodying TV stuff, like cop shows and stuff in general. I didn't know it was actually like parodying a specific thing.
Well, now I have to look this up because I'm not 100% sure about that, I guess. Go on, talk amongst yourself, but I think that was the case.
Well, while you're looking that up, I'll throw out one other thing, and this was maybe me giving the Twilight Zone too much credit because they've been generally pretty good about these things, so I assume they're going to my operating assumption until proven otherwise is that they are pretty good. So I was like, well, it seems clearly that it's Earth, but that seems way too obvious for what they're doing. And maybe just the fact that it like lacks visible curvature and looks larger than the moon and has a breathable atmosphere and stuff. Maybe it's just that's the, you know, they're on a TV show budget. They couldn't afford to have them someplace where they were wearing, you know, full breathing apparatus the whole time or had a set that looked like the size of an asteroid. So I was speculating that maybe that it was, even though it was shot on Earth and looks like Earth and we think it's Earth, that the twist was going to be it was something else and it was just that's what their budget allowed them. But
Yeah.
I was wrong.
I was also wrong. Let's get all of our corrections out right off the bat. It's called Police Story. Police Squad was probably
Okay.
based off of Police Story, but yes, it was called Police Story in like the mid 70s. So they were both on Police Story.
Gotcha. Well, hey, while we're still in the beginning, I want to throw out something that is right in an area I know you like to talk about in a few of these space episodes. I was thinking if you're, you know, space is huge, as we've established.
The jury stipulates that space is, or the court stipulates that space is huge.
So I say like it's far more likely if your ship had an issue, it was that it's just going to like float endlessly than that it's going to end up
Hitting
landing
something,
on an
yeah.
asteroid or back on Earth or anything. And I was thinking of like the movie Gravity, where that's part of the horror is just the idea of like you're out there floating endlessly alone. You'd never get captured by a gravitational field
Right.
or land anywhere. And that could have been a really, I mean, we might see another Twilight Zone episode like this, I don't know. But if you started with this same premise, but it's like them having this sort of, you know, breakdown of order and their social relationships, but they're stuck inside the rocket, that I think in some ways would have been more interesting, kind of a Apollo 13-ish.
Yeah. And probably pretty top. Of course, Apollo 13 was at everything, all space sort of travel was after this. Really, the Twilight Zone was kind of the pioneer of space travel, let's say. While we're, I love how we're both saying while we're still in the beginning, then we're like 16, 17 minutes into this episode. But another thing that I want to point out about this sort of intro is how kind of inept NASA was and how calm they were considering they had lost a ship and a crew. I think I counted with the bodies because I think it was 4 members had actually died that they had like laid out on the desert floor, and these 3. So they lost a ship and a crew of astronauts, like 6 or 7 guys.
And they said they had spent like 4 years plus like getting everything ready for this, and then the nursery rhyme was kind of cute, but like seriously, the guy's gonna like stare out the window and quote a nursery rhyme. Shouldn't he be on the phone with somebody like, we lost him, we got to figure out what to do?
Instead he's like, hickory dickory dock. 3 astronauts
I have a riddle for you
are
now.
off the clock. Yeah, exactly. That was a little weird.
But yeah, I agree. They were very nonplussed for. Whereas to the flip side, the crew members, right as soon as we see, like the acting is way over the top, crazy from the get go. They are not nonplussed, and I actually did find it though. I find it odd right at the start that the other 2 crew members are trying to figure out what happened to Corey. Like, why is he acting so weird and crazy? I'm like, it seems like he's not having a positive reaction. He's not managing his panic well, but he's kind of having a more normal reaction to the actual situation than the other ones are.
Right.
Who seem not to be aware of the danger they're really in.
Yeah, though Corey was clearly the villain, and the whole thing though, I mean, like he's the only one is like basically like, hey, essentially we need to start thinking about survival and like rationing water. And I'm glad you mentioned the 4 years thing with NASA saying they set it up, because one of the things the colonel says when they're in the middle of the Reno desert is he's like, you know, it took them 4 years just to build that ship, and so we're going to be out here for like 4.5 years at least. And so Corey though immediately is like, there's one of their crew members is basically dying on the ground, and the colonel goes to give him water, and Corey's like, he's gonna be dead by the afternoon, don't give him any water. And of course they have Pearson and the colonel have their aside, like you said, what's wrong with Corey. And then of course they do give him water, and I will say the colonel had a good line Here, he's basically like, if he's thirsty, we give him water. If he's hot, we give him shade. If he dies, we give him a little prayer or something. He had some actually kind of cool lines, and he had one later on that I'll point out too.
Yeah, I wrote down his same line because I thought it was great. I think this is there's like 2 lines in this episode I cited, and that was one of them. If he dies, he dies, but nobody gets behind to push.
Yes, that's right. That was a great line too. Was that your second line, or should we?
No, that was the first one. The
Okay.
second one's later on.
Okay. When we get to that, let's try and read them both at the same time and see if we pick the same line. Okay. So
And if we didn't, this is going to be super random.
well, I'll edit it. I'll fix it in post. But like Corey you're right. Corey was being rational. I mean, he was the one who was thinking about, yeah. I mean, that's like that. It's like Alive, the movie. Like, it's that situation. Like, well, how much are we going to sacrifice for? Or that scene in Saving Private Ryan when they're the doctor's dying and they give him a bunch of morphine. Not that they were short on morphine, but it was like, hey, yeah, at a certain point, is this kind of a lost cause? And do we just let him die? And I thought that was
Yeah, I think like you would like to think in reality maybe there would have been more of a discussion because you have like the survival
Right.
instinct versus do we want to help the guy, but instead it was sort of portrayed as like, well, obviously Corey's the bad guy because he doesn't want to give the guy the water, and the other ones are rational and behaving like, but they're not rational.
They're
like
compassionate.
they're adhering to this order that no longer exists.
right. I totally agree. And he kind of says that to the captain or the colonel at one point. He's like, your morality. I think I wrote down this line too, because toward the end, Corey's basically in the sort of over-explaining.
It's the other line I wrote down. You know your trouble, Colonel. You were looking for morality in the wrong
Oh,
place.
it is? Okay. I my other one. Yeah, I wrote that down too, but not as a good line. No. But no, you're right. Your trouble, Colonel, is that you're looking for morality in the wrong place. It was a kind of beating over the head line from Corey. Toward the end so just to sum up, of course, they shoot Corey, we think, kills Pearson for his water, then shoots the colonel clearly for his water, and then finds out that he's on Earth because Pearson has written the most ridiculous, if I were Pearson. So Pearson's dying in the sand, he's been like, he fell in either, according to Corey, he fell and hit his head and is dying, or Corey, who at one point goes to pick up a rock to kill the colonel, probably smashed him over the head and killed him to take his water. So he draws like 3 lines in the sand, and Corey later finds out that it's telephone lines. Or power lines or whatever he drew, and it was to indicate that they're on Earth. Maybe writing Earth I know he had limited time, but like writing Earth would have been fine. Maybe just saying we're on Earth, because he was like, oh. I guess he couldn't talk because he got hit in the head, but he could.
Like, how do you draw a telephone line? Like, it just looks like straight lines. Like,
Right.
Nobody's going to interpret. I was confused. I thought Pearson was going to say Corey had attacked him, or like was writing Corey in the sand or something.
Right. Me too.
And then he's like, instead just drawing this weird equal sign. I'm like, this is okay. Maybe Pearson's lost a lot of blood because he is not functioning on any sort of like, that's the least useful thing you could have done right now. It would have been more useful for you to just die.
Yeah, because and then the colonel's like, well, it's like a symbol or a glyph or something, and we have to figure it out. It's like, no, shit. It was.
But also, wait a second. So there's a plot hole here because
There's a few.
the idea, well, or 20 or 30, but Pearson there was one that like really confused me. It looked like the way they were setting that Pearson had like climbed to the top of that ridge and then had like fallen back down or something, and that was where he saw the
right.
telephone lines and because then oh god, I keep forgetting who
Corey Pearson
Colonel
Donlin.
Colonel, right. So then he's like, all right, I'm going to go look at the top of this ridge and see what Pearson saw. And so I was waiting for like, it was going to be right over that. But then later, after Corey's killed the Colonel, Corey like goes up there. He can't see anything from there. He's like trekking on for like another 6 mountains before he gets to the telephone lines being in view. And I'm like, what? I don't. What happened? But Pearson had was dying, had already been beaten on the head by Corey or whatever. I was so confused.
So I might be able to clear this up because
Okay.
allegedly Corey and Pearson had left together to go see if they could find stuff. Corey claimed that they split off. So at some point that would make sense if they did actually split off. Maybe Pearson found this stuff. Regardless of, you would think he would have immediately told if Corey killed Pearson, you would think Pearson would have immediately, if they did get separated right when they got back together, he would have immediately told them that they were on Earth.
Right.
Especially when he saw him. I guess that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
Maybe Corey was waiting in wait somewhere for Pearson, and Pearson never even saw him, and Corey just lunges out and bashes him over the head with a rock.
Or there is the possibility that he did fall. I mean, there is certainly the possibility that he did fall. Because, and then remember too, Mark, maybe this helps clear it up. Because when Corey gets back to the colonel and he's like, he slipped and hit his head. He's like, we split up, and he's like, I knew if I told you that we were together, you wouldn't have believed me anyhow. And when they go to find Pearson's body, he does say, this is where it was. It wasn't where I left it. Granted, he's not that far away, but he did move from where allegedly, and there was another question for you, whether Corey was able to find in this completely same looking homogeneous wasteland the exact spot that he left Pearson. But
you're making a real pitch for Nevada as a tourist destination.
I literally, one of my notes here is, how much of a shithole is Nevada that they are like, this is a terrible wasteland that we mistook one of our great states for this desolate, horrible, life-sucking wasteland over a rock. I'm like, oh, that sucks. I have a buddy that just asked me to go visit him in Reno in April.
Yeah, it's visit Reno, Nevada.
Yeah. So, there definitely were some plot holes. I'm gonna forecast this a little bit. Plot holes aside, I didn't dislike this episode like in a couple weeks back that we had some ones that I had kind of actively disliked, because I did think it was a neat kind of twist. It was very Twilight Zone-y. We had spacemen, we had travel, we had space travel. Well, not that much space travel. We did have kind of a mystery.
They have very poor space travel. They launch and immediately crash back into Earth.
Right. We did have kind of a mystery. This definitely reminded me of, I assume you probably saw this, there was a Stephen King short story called The Mist that was adapted into a movie with Thomas Jane in it. Have you ever heard of that one?
I remember that movie came out. I did not see it.
So the whole plot of The Mist is a mist... A mist comes rolling into this town, and there's all these evil or creatures in the mist that are killing people, and these people are pinned in a grocery store. Thomas Jane eventually gets his family out, and I forget exactly what happens at the end, but his car breaks down or something, and he thinks that the mist is coming to get him, and he can kind of hear it coming to get him. So he shoots his entire family to spare them the agony of this horrible death at these monsters. And when he's about to kill himself, he sees it's a super fucking dark ending. He sees the army come over the court, the clearing, or coming out of the clearing, and he's slaughters his entire family for no reason. And I was like, oh, it's a very, very good dark ending. It's not that great of a movie. I did read the short story. I probably remember that better than the movie, but we're probably worth seeing. Well, I just ruined the ending, so it's probably not worth seeing actually. So it's but it had that feel to it where and Corey even at the end is kind of lamenting. He's like, "What have I done? I killed them because blah blah blah." And it was a little overly dramatic, but it was dark. I mean, it was a pretty dark ending.
It was a little overly dramatic in the same sense, the Milky Way is like a little thing. I don't even have a good analogy. It was super overly dramatic.
I got one for you. It was a little overly dramatic, like Reno, Nevada is a little bit of a shithole.
And we'd like to remind everyone, this podcast is sponsored by Reno, Nevada. What happens in Reno doesn't get remembered.
The Board of Tourism. Apologies to our one listener from Reno, Nevada. Hello, Jim.
We have a listener from Reno? That's awesome.
No, I don't think so.
Not anymore.
Now we
Not
don't.
anymore, we don't.
No, we don't.
Hey, why did they have all these guns on like this space mission that was like the first time people were going into space? Like in the Lonely, it kind of made sense, right? Because the space travelers were also prison guards.
Sure.
Because remember, we had the argument over, not argument, but like discuss, like, are they prison guards who get trained as astronauts or vice versa? They had no plans to like land anywhere or encounter anything. It really seemed like they were just trying to see, like, can we launch a rocket and have it go on a mission and come back? And yet they're like, and it's not they're just armed with sidearms. They have like this giant rifle and stuff. And we've talked in the past, I think, with the Lonely, about how expensive it is to launch anything into space. Like every amount of weight takes like proportionately, 10 times or whatever, that much fuel. Why are they bringing all these weapons?
Because in space, you'd rather have a gun and not need it than need a gun and not have it. Should we take a break, Mark?
We'll see you after the break.
Okay, we are back from the break. I think we only have a couple more thoughts really to this. I want to give the Colonel the shout out for the other line that I really liked from him. He's talking to Corey, and he and Corey are at odds. He goes to Corey, buddy, what I'm going to give you can't be pinned on a uniform. Basically.
I like literally just pumped my fist in the air because I was like scrolling through and like, oh wait, I did have one more line noted, and that was it.
Yes, good. I knew we should have read it at the same time. So
that would have been awesome. I'm sorry I shot down your idea.
That's okay.
That would have been fantastic.
Yes. So I do like, well, you would have read the wrong one anyhow, but I do like, I liked,
I would have read a line from another episode.
I do. There was maybe some overacting going on, but I did think that the characters, I thought that was pretty neat for a character. I mean, I've this situation, I couldn't think of specific things other than maybe like Planet of the Apes that this reminded me of, but I've seen, and Alive, I guess, but I've seen characters in situations like this in media before that I thought was kind of a neat progressive, I guess, or like advanced or foreseeing plot point that this woman, Madeline and Serling put these characters in. I thought was kind of neat.
Yeah, I think the other references that I made are things this reminded me of were all things about people trying to survive in inhospitable environments, like The Martian, which was a really good book and then a pretty decent movie.
Oh, yeah, I love both.
127 Hours,
yes.
Which wasn't, although he might have also been out somewhere in Nevada.
Probably.
I don't know where he is. But,
Arizona.
Another example of how far you'll go to survive. And Gravity, like, which I talked about earlier. But I think you're right. Like, all of those are more recent things. I thought this is pretty clever, thinking about that in terms of the context of space travel in this period before anyone's really been in space.
Yeah. I also did really like toward the end of the episode when Corey is working his way to the top of the hill, a Serling voiceover comes in and he's straight up taunting Corey. And he's like, come on, Corey. He's like, you can do it. Like, and he's really mocking him. He's like, basically like, forget about the bodies you left back in the sand.
Can I read that part?
Yeah,
It's good.
please.
Okay, so then this is like not mid episode, but not quite
Right
at
toward
the end
the
yet
end,
voiceover. Yeah. Now you make tracks, Mr. Corey. You move out and up like some kind of ghostly billy club was tapping at your ankle and telling you that it was later than you think. You scrabble up rock hills and feel hot sand underneath your feet, and every now and then take a look over your shoulder at a giant sun suspended in a dead and motionless sky, like an unblinking eye that probes at the back of your head in a prolonged accusation. Mr. Corey, last remaining member of a doomed crew, keep moving. Make tracks, Mr. Corey. Push up and push out, because if you stop, maybe sanity will get you by the throat. Maybe realization will pry open your mind, and the horror that you left down in the sand will seep in. Yeah, Mr. Corey, yeah, you better keep moving. That's the order of the moment. Keep moving.
I thought that was so great. And
it's a taunt, yeah.
And it reminded me of, again, having read Anne Serling's book about Rod, just thinking about Serling's military time, and he seemed so committed and so loyal to his friends. I think if I had to guess, Corey is one of Serling's most despicable characters to Serling. Like, I think he thinks what Corey did was completely unforgivable in comparison to the characters that we've seen so far. And because that leaving a man behind and like literally killing these guys for sacrificing your crew for yourself was such a selfish thing to do. And Serling even says the voiceover with this venomous tone. It was really neat. There was a lot of emotion, which we don't normally get out of the voiceovers that Serling's done, and you could hear it in his voice. I thought it was really neat.
I think that's really intriguing that you said that's one of his most despicable characters, because, and I totally agree with you. I think that's a really good point about the voiceover and the kind of venom in the performance and the writing to it. We've obviously seen some other characters where the voiceover painted a pretty poor picture of them.
Sure.
And we've, often commented on that. I think what's different here is you get the sense like Corey is somebody who was not just sort of a lost cause from the get-go, where you almost feel like some of these other characters, the voiceover, and I'm thinking of The Four of Us Lay Dying, the hero in that, or the guy from Escape Clause, where the voiceover like basically lays out they've just been a jerk and horrible human for as long as they've been alive.
Right.
And here Corey seemed to be a decent person, part of this crew. He was friends with them and sort of made this choice, granted in extreme circumstances, but made this choice to change. And I guess that leaves sort of the question, if to Serling maybe that's the bigger sin, is not just being somebody who is basically born bad or bad from birth, but to really be somebody who's capable of more and yet make this choice to kill your friends.
Yeah, it's almost like the measure of a man. Like, what are you going to do when the bullets are actually flying over your head? And this guy turned tail. And it was such a neat, I thought, indictment of this character. And as nasty as those descriptions were, and I think you're right, it's Walking Distance and The Four of Us Were Dying are the two that I think he had the most unflattering description of his characters. This was the most, I thought, way above and beyond that. And the fact that he came out toward the end of the episode before his kind of final closing narration to just taunt this guy. I thought it was really, really neat, frankly.
Right, because that voiceover there is not needed for plot purposes.
No.
We get what Corey's doing. We see it. It's just kind of coming before that. The other thing that brings to my mind is I mentioned earlier that when they first crash, it seems to me Corey, to some degree, is the only one behaving rationally, if panicked, and certainly non-compassionately.
Right.
But being aware of sort of the difficulty of the situation. It does seem as this goes on, he is actually fairly irrational about it, in the sense that he mentions that they have enough water for 5 days for both of them, or if he kills the colonel, then 10 days for just him. I'm not really sure what the difference is between surviving 5 days or 10 days. Like, if they're really not on Earth, if they're on some asteroid, and as they believe at that time, it's going to take 4 years plus to get a rescue party there, even if the people on Earth knew where they were. It doesn't matter if you survive 5 days or 10 days, you're not going to make it. And basically, Corey's choosing, instead of 5 days with another human, I'll take 10 days, like, by myself, marooned, just waiting to die. And that is a really bizarre kind of, like, in that situation, if presented with those options, and I get that, the brain will always hold out hope, like, maybe there will be some way I'll get rescued or find more sustenance or whatever, but I would rather have somebody else with me for 5 days and of being marooned and then die than be alone for 10 and then die.
I would agree with you, except the fact that our survival instinct is, I think a lot of people underestimate human beings' survival instinct. It's easy for me to say outside of that situation what I would do, but the human capacity for keeping themselves alive, keeping yourself alive, is extremely powerful. So I'm not saying that I would shoot.
That's fair.
I will say, though,
remind me not to go on a space trip with you and crash land.
I will say, though, Corey, for somebody who was so worried about water, was awfully sloppy in the way he drank water. He would like drink out of his canteen
Like
and it'd be like
spilling out of his mouth.
yeah,
all
it's like dripping down his chest. I was like, Corey, what the hell is wrong with this guy?
He's like, well, we had enough water for 6 weeks, but I just took a drink and now we have none.
There's some media thing that I've seen where somebody's like taking a bath and like gargling and doing all this. Oh, Three Amigos. It reminds me of Three Amigos when they're Rusty, I think, is the one that's actually they're in the desert and they're like, you know, dehydrating, and Rusty's like gargling and like spits out his water and all that stuff as Martin Short's line. Isn't that Three Amigos? I think
That is Three Amigos. Can I, before we move on, just one other thing about that is I was thinking of the idea like what Corey would do, like left alone there for 10 days. And I'm just thinking in the world of the Twilight Zone, we've definitely seen like people do not survive well in isolation. That's been an ongoing theme since the very first episode. Where is everybody? I mean, time enough at last. Our hero's ready to shoot himself after one day. And that was, again, made me like, but there was a character who is kind of more consciously aware. That was not his survival instinct. That was like, this will be horrible being here alone.
Yeah.
And Corey instead chooses what he thinks would be 10 days of scrabbling around on rocks alone and then dying.
Well, and again, but you're right. I mean, that hope that I think the idea is if I have 10 days to try and find something, you know, that's better than not. That's, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, the logic doesn't make any sense because two people looking for 5 days each is basically, at least you could go in different directions. You'd have a better chance probably. It didn't make a ton of sense, but I kind of like this episode a little bit. I will. And also, before I forget, because I can't believe we didn't mention it during Third from the Sun. I did put it in the show notes. I can't believe we didn't bring up Planet of the Apes in Third from the Sun. So this is another very Planet of the Apes-y moment. I mean, this is even more so of a Planet of the Apes-y moment that it was Earth all along. You blew it up. It had that same feel to it, that same Planet of the Apes feel to it, where the surprise is that, oh no, this is just Earth. Except the wasteland is just Reno, Nevada.
Wouldn't Planet of the Apes be so much better if instead of seeing the half-buried Statue of Liberty, he just sees two power lines?
And he sees a 3-line drawing of two power lines.
And he's like, wait, power lines? You mean this is Earth? And of course the other guy's like an ape and like...
Sorry to all of our ape listeners out there.
That's half our audience.
So, did you have any other thoughts, Mark, or do you want to get to closing narration and sweat levels and ratings?
I just one as we're sort of tongue-in-cheek poking fun at some things, because I agree with you. Actually, this was not one of my favorite episodes. I wasn't always sure where it was going or what I was supposed to necessarily care about or think, but I was always intrigued enough to see how it played out and how this sort of drama between the few. But saying it with love, I wrote that when Pearson's trying to say something, we talked about why he draws instead of talking. It's because the Colonel never stops talking. He's like, Pearson, say something. What happened? What's going? And like Pearson keeps trying to talk, and the Colonel keeps interrupting him, and that's why he starts drawing.
I didn't think about that. It's like on Airplane.
No, I was like, for the love of God, Colonel, he's trying to tell you something. Shut up.
It's like on Airplane when they're all shaking the woman in hysterics and slapping her.
There's a long line, and like guy has a bat.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, we haven't talked much about the production itself because basically they're just out in the middle of the desert, kind of shooting. There were a couple of really nice shots. You mentioned that they chose the location well, and I agreed. They found something that most of the Twilight Zone episodes, because of what their plots are and what's happening, tend to take place in more urban areas, and we're surrounded by city and other stuff. And this really took advantage of the fact that we're out in the middle of nowhere to get some great wides. There's one pretty early on where it's this super wide shot from low of them like up on a ridge, and the camera just pans over and you just see like desolation as far as the eye can see. And so I appreciated the fact that they were getting outside the studio and doing something, or at least looking like that. There's one place where they used a matte painting.
I missed it.
But it was like in the distance and kind of looked, but it wasn't what we've seen before where they're like right up against the matte painting. But I appreciated the way that they took advantage of what looked to be like out on location, really in a pretty desolate area, to get some of these wider shots and play with the environment in a way that we haven't always seen.
Yeah.
I think that's what I got.
Cool. So our closing narration, practical joke perpetrated by Mother Nature and a combination of improbable events. Practical joke wearing the trappings of nightmare, of terror, of desperation. Small human drama played out in a desert 97 miles from Reno, Nevada, USA, continent of North America, the Earth, and, of course, the Twilight Zone. Which I kind of like that one. It was a neat little drop in of the Twilight Zone.
I like that. I'm going to start addressing all my envelopes that way, like the full address, and then like USA, North America, Earth,
And, of course,
Milky Way, and of course the Twilight Zone.
So, what do we think about our sweat level on this one, Mark? They're in the Reno desert.
Yeah, scale of 1 to 10. So I think the sweat was pretty justified. I will say
Yes.
they're darn sweaty from really early on. So even though it's justified, I'll maybe give them like a 6 because they're
Okay.
pretty darn sweaty.
I'm down with a 6. Yeah, I thought the same thing. At first, I had a little bit lower, but right in that neighborhood, like 5. And I agree. They were justifiably sweaty because they were in the Reno desert.
You know who should have been sweating more? Those NASA scientists who lost the ship in the first place. They should have been
Sweating
ripping.
their
Instead, they're
jobs.
standing out the window giving Hamlet soliloquies.
Is it Hamlet or was it I think it's from a nursery rhyme, isn't it? Doesn't he say that's from a nursery rhyme?
Oh, no, it's definitely from a nursery rhyme,
Okay.
but I was thinking it's like Hamlet giving his big
Oh,
soliloquy.
I got it. Yeah. Okay.
To be or not to be, I shot an arrow into the air. It fell to earth, I know not where. I have no job, and I don't know the rest of this speech, but that's okay, because they're never going to see us again, because the rest of the episode ignores us.
And then let's rate this episode.
That is not the actual dialogue.
No, it's Alas Poor Yorick, where is my damn arrow? Let's rate this episode, Mark.
All right, what would you give it, Mike?
So this is out of
5.
And I was looking back at I cheated a little bit and looked back at some of our, I guess that's not cheating because if I had a good memory.
Is it cheating to look at our episodes?
Apparently
I
for,
listened to one of our episodes. No!
yeah, apparently it's taboo to listen to our episodes based on our numbers. No, I looking back at our ratings and yes, this is out of 5. And I have suspect that you will be able to talk me down because the more I'm thinking about this episode, the more I'm like, But I would probably go with a 4 for this episode because this had the Twilight Zone-y sci-fi astronauts and and it had a Twilight Zone twist that I kind of liked. That even though it was very telegraphed, I thought, not to use Pearson's drawing to, but there were a lot of silly things that happened, but I liked this idea and I liked this episode. So I would give it a 4, but I can be convinced otherwise, I'm sure.
I feel like that's usually our dynamic is you rate higher and then I try to talk you down on things.
Well, I want to get
I
Ann Serling on this podcast, so I'm going to be really nice about it. No, I just looking back at what we've rated 4s, I feel like that was like to me.
What are some other episodes we rated 4s?
So Time Enough at Last was a 4. It's probably not.
That's clearly better than this.
And 16mm Shrine was a 4.
And it was also better than this.
But Perchance to Dream was a 3. So maybe a 3.5.
Maybe we overrated Perchance to Dream.
Well, I kind of
You know what I feel like
Perchance
we
to
don't have a
Dream.
lot. We don't have a lot of 2s. I'm not saying this is a 2, but I was just thinking like I feel like when something's bad, we're like down in the 1.5 range, and then we like jump up to 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Mr.
I don't know- I
Denton
don't
was
know
a
if I-
3. Where is Everybody was a 3. So maybe this is a 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say a 3, and
Okay, I'm fine with a
I
3.
found this episode interesting. Like I said, I always wanted to see how it played out. I like the fact that it was character driven, and something we do talk about sometimes with these ratings is how much it made you think. And something I think that where this episode holds up and is maybe worth thinking about, even though the fact that they're on Earth is telegraphed too early to maybe make this come through as much as it could, is this idea of like, even if you landed on another world that happened to have like the same kind of gravity as ours and breathable air, which the odds of both of those together are like 0,
Right.
having the resources you need, like the lack of supplies or anything else useful on the planet, is what's going to kill them. Like they don't have water or food or anything. And it got me thinking about this argument that has been made by various people about that, we'll eventually need to colonize other planets or worlds, like we'd be much better off taking care of our own.
Yeah, agreed. We've said that on this podcast before.
I think we have, and it but that's what this sort of struck me, and I think I don't know if this was intentional or not, because I would, as progressive as Serling may have been, I'm guessing not, just because I think these things were in there because they needed them for the plot. But there's kind of this idea of they're actually on Earth and still don't have the resources like they need or how to make it. Like, so how the heck does anyone think we could do better anywhere else?
Right. I would also point out too, and you're saying the odds, and I love thinking about those odds of actually finding another habitable planet. The other factor, not only having the right gravity, the right sun exposure, all that kind of stuff, but also the time, because bear in mind that Earth was very uninhabitable for almost all of Earth's history until relatively recently that it was actually habitable for life. So, I mean, the grand galactic scope of things, it's a blink of an eye that it's actually, even Earth is habitable. So if you showed up, 500 million years ago or whatever, and you're like, oh, this is not a good place to hang out.
There's all the different the theories about like why we haven't been contacted by aliens, or you can believe that we have been and the government's covering it up, whatever.
It's because we came up with TikTok. That's why they haven't contacted us.
There's these ideas about part of it is just like, the odds of, maybe there have been lots of advanced civilizations, but they end up like dying out or killing themselves, or your star only lasts for so long, and maybe none of them have been able to colonize, and we just have not overlapped in time with any of them.
Or exactly. Which is also a matter of distance. If they're even if we had overlapped in time and they're too far away to make it there in their lifetime, it's interesting to think about.
Maybe there's another like civilization exactly like ours right now that's even relatively close. Let's say it's like 1 billion miles away. By the time their signals get to us, we won't. I mean, I'm doing the math wrong here. 1 billion miles, their signals actually would make it at some point. But you get the idea, right? It's like we could be trying to communicate with them. They're trying to communicate with us, and both our civilizations will have petered out by the time those messages get there.
I totally get the idea, and that's why I hope in the next, 20 years or so, we get a version of Deja Reviewed coming from space, and we project this out into space, and we swap along the way.
This should be on the next Voyager, like, instead of all that stuff about like, here's our language and here's what humans look like, it's just
here's Deja Reviewed.
Episodes of Deja Reviewed, and it doesn't even include the actual episodes for them to watch and understand. They just get our analysis.
They just get. Oh gosh. Well, thank you.
All right.
Sorry, Mark. Did you have a last thought?
I definitely don't. I probably had my last thought several minutes ago, and we've just been
riffing. Okay. Thank you all for listening. This was Deja Reviewed. Next week's episode is episode 16. Can you believe we've done 15 of these, Mark? Is episode 16 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, titled, oh, Mark, I forgot to let you guess along. So here we go. Titled The Hitchhiker.
Well, my first thought was the old thing of the hitchhiker who like they pick up in the car, and it's like the ghost story, and it turns out that they actually had died, and it's a story you tell around the campfire. And I was thinking like, it can't be that, because that's like such an old trope, but maybe in 1959 it wasn't worn out yet. So I'll go with it's that old ghost story about the driving and pick up the hitchhiker, and then find out later that that person had been killed on that side of the road, and blah blah blah. That would be a very terrible way to tell that ghost story, because I don't remember all the details anymore.
Okay, thanks, Mark. We will find out how accurate you are in your guess next week. Feel free to leave us a rating and a comment wherever you're listening to us, or if you go on dejareview.com, you can find all of our social media, but you can also leave us a voicemail or a text message, and we would really like to hear from you 4 people out there.
And don't forget the apes.
The apes, and I'm sorry to the one person in Reno that turned us off after this episode.
If you're still listening and you live in Reno and would like to put in a positive word about Reno, you can leave that message and we will play it next time.
Absolutely. We hope you tune in next week.
Deja Reviewed.